Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I rise to speak in support of the first reading of the Organised Crime and Anti-Corruption Legislation Bill. The Labour Party will be supporting this bill through to Select Committee, and we're looking forward to the ongoing debate around these matters. New Zealanders should rightly be proud of the fact that we regularly rank very, very well on international studies and surveys when it comes to transparency, when it comes to lack of corruption and so forth. But there is no room for complacency, as those who have spoken before me have already mentioned. We are consistently among the least corrupt countries in the world. However, there are certain warning signs to suggest that we should be taking this matter very seriously. We're seeing a lessening of transparency, for example, from this government, and my colleague Annette King mentioned in her speech before the open admission by the Prime Minister that the current government, don't take the Official Information Act seriously. They will willfully break the law when it comes to the Official Information Act, which is one of the most important instruments we have in our constitutional arrangements to ensure transparency and to ensure, basically a process, a political governing process free from corruption, and this government will willingly break that law, and the Prime Minister himself has admitted it. We have an Official Information Act because of the old adage, sunlight is the best disinfectant. When all of the workings of government are public, then people will be forced to act in a way that is honest and that is open and that is decent, and that is a very good thing. It is not a good thing when government don't lead by example, when they willingly flout the law in the way that they have been with the Official Information Act. I went and looked in preparation of this debate at the definition, the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of the word corruption. And it states, it is defined as dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery. Dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power. Now, there are many, many examples where, if not fraudulent, some of the behaviour that we have been seeing is certainly dishonest. Certainly dishonest. Take, for example, the conduct of the minister who introduced this legislation to the House, the Honourable, no, she's not Honourable anymore, Judith Collins, who introduced this legislation to the Parliament. The irony of that is that Judith Collins introduced this legislation around the time that she took a trip to China to talk about reducing corruption, and yet she was surreptitiously visiting Aurovida to promote her husband's business interests. And of course, we know that they then gave money to the National Party. Now, I know that people at home will be able to draw their own conclusions about whether or not any of that kind of conduct might fit within the definition that I just mentioned from the Oxford English Dictionary. We know that there has been a corruption of the political process in New Zealand because it has been spelled out in great detail in the Dirty Politics books, and those are simply a disgrace. So, for example, the cadre of people, and that's the only way you could describe them, with links to the National Party, have been engaged in what can only be described as destructive and offensive behaviour that most New Zealanders, including New Zealanders who support the National Party, possibly even are members of the National Party, would find simply disgraceful. And yet that is all spelled out here, that is exactly what has been going on within John Key's national government. These same people that referred to the Christchurch earthquake victims as scum, they referred to the victims of the Pike River mining disaster as feral. These are the people that John Key personally and his government ministers like to associate themselves with, and I think they should hang their heads in shame about that. They have targeted public figures, non-government organisations, political opponents, anybody that gets in their way. They have been targeting them, denigrating them, smearing their private lives and trying to dissuade them from speaking out publicly. Those are not the actions of a government that is committed to openness, transparency and fighting corruption. Those are not the actions that New Zealanders should be expecting from their current government, because it has not only been revealed that the Prime Minister's staff have been involved directly in supporting that kind of behaviour, but in fact ministers directly themselves have been involved in supporting those kinds of activities. It should be very concerning to all New Zealanders when we're debating measures to fight corruption that those kind of smear campaigns were used against to undermine regulators like the Serious Fraud Office and the Financial Markets Authority. If we're really serious about being an open, transparent country that is free from corruption, the Serious Fraud Office and the Financial Markets Authority should be able to go about their business without having the government or its surrogates smearing the activities of those who are doing their jobs. And yet we have seen spelled out in black and white clear examples of where that has happened. Ultimately, it cost Judith Collins her ministerial position, and that is right and proper. But have we ever seen any concrete action from the Prime Minister to put an end to the activities that underpinned her resignation? No, we have not. Let's be clear what this was. This was the Minister of Justice being involved in a smear campaign against senior officials in the Serious Fraud Office. That is simply
Order. I'd just like to ask the member to come back to the bill and to warn him about going too far into the facts of something which is currently being investigated by the police. And I think the member can narrow himself back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to do that. Mr. Speaker, to return to the bill, and I want to turn to Transparency International's definitions and descriptions of what corruption involves. Corruption, and this is from Transparency International, corruption generally comprises illegal activities which are deliberately hidden and only come to light through scandals, investigations and prosecutions. One of the reasons that scandals arise in New Zealand or that investigations and prosecutions can take place is because we have a very open system of government now. We have an Official Information Act that allows New Zealanders to get access to the information. Many of the scandals that have been unearthed have used those mechanisms of government like the Official Information Act to unearth the very behaviour that this bill seeks to limit and to basically not just to limit, but basically to stop from happening. And therefore it is incumbent upon the government and on the incumbent government of the day to lead by example when it comes to making sure that there is transparency around their activities. Because scandals, yes, some scandals are bigger than others, but scandals will typically only be unearthed when somebody either seeks out the information, digs for the information and puts all of the pieces of the puzzle together, or somebody blows the whistle. They're not going to be doing that if A, their access to the information is shut down because people willingly don't follow the law when it comes to things like the Official Information Act, or when people whose job it is to enforce those laws and regulations are smeared or actively undermined, whether it be from within or from without the government. So it is very important that we continue to be vigilant when it comes to those things, and I think we've seen some very clear examples just recently of where the current government haven't lived up to the type of behaviour that New Zealanders should rightly be able to expect from their government. So I want to say that the Labour Party will be supporting this bill through to the Select Committee. It is going to be an interesting debate, and I think that we'll be getting into this in much greater detail as it progresses. We should feel fortunate in New Zealand that we are that we're a country that is relatively free from corruption, that we regularly rate very highly in the international surveys and studies that are done. That is something to be proud of, but it is not something to be complacent about. New Zealand should continue to rank highly in those surveys. We will only do that if we continue to maintain our vigilance. That's one of the many reasons that the Labour Party will be supporting this bill.